Lauren Hayes was 29 years old, a second-grade teacher, and a single mother who had always believed that stability came from quiet endurance. She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue, didn't demand more than what she thought she deserved. So when she received the eviction notice on a Tuesday afternoon in January, she folded it carefully and placed it inside a clear plastic folder before sitting down beside her 6-year-old daughter, Ellie. The apartment building had been sold. All tenants were given 30 days to leave. Ellie was spreading library books across the kitchen table, excited about a story of a bear building a house in the woods. Lauren smiled and asked which one they should read first, even as the number 30 echoed in her mind like a ticking clock. Before I continue, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who has subscribed and supported this channel. It truly means more than you know. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to do so. It's completely free, and it helps the channel grow. Like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. That night, after Ellie fell asleep, Lauren did the math. A new deposit would require at least $4,000. Her savings barely covered a quarter of that. Her ex-husband Nathan's child support had stopped months earlier. With no realistic options left, she picked up the phone and called her mother, Carolyn Hayes. Carolyn paused the way she always did before delivering disappointing news. Long enough to create hope. Then she said there wasn't space in the house because Lauren's brother Jason and his family were already staying there. Lauren asked if Ellie could stay temporarily while she figured things out, but Carolyn declined again, saying it wouldn't be fair to Jason's children. Lauren didn't argue. She never had. 3 days later, she and Ellie moved into the Maplewood family shelter with 2 suitcases and a stuffed bear named Captain. The hallways smelled faintly of disinfectant and old food. The bunk beds had thin vinyl mattresses that crinkled with every movement. Ellie took the top bunk and called it a treehouse. Lauren lay awake beneath her, listening to the soft hum of the hallway light and wondering how long temporary really meant. The next morning, a caseworker named Angela introduced herself and explained the waiting lists for housing assistance. Angela didn't offer false optimism. She simply promised to help Lauren move forward as quickly as possible. Lauren settled into a routine built on discipline rather than comfort. She woke early, dressed Ellie, dropped her at school, and taught her own students all day before returning to the shelter each evening. Ellie drew constantly using broken crayons from the communal supply bin. Most of her drawings were of houses with wide windows and small yards. Lauren watched quietly, never correcting the dream that paper allowed her daughter to have. One evening, after calculating expenses yet again, she texted Jason to ask for help with a deposit on a small studio she had found near Ellie's school. He declined, saying finances were tight. Later that night, she saw his social media post celebrating a newly purchased SUV. She saved the screenshot without commenting. Carolyn visited the shelter once, bringing hand-me-down clothes and offering public warmth that felt rehearsed. When they were alone, she warned Lauren that if the situation continued, she might need to reconsider Ellie's living arrangement through the court's temporary guardianship order. The guardianship had been created during Lauren's divorce from Nathan as a short-term legal safeguard, but it had never been formally dissolved afterward. Carolyn now used it as quiet leverage. Lauren began documenting everything: texts, dates, conversations, without fully knowing why. Weeks later, she found another apartment but needed $2,000 to secure it. Carolyn refused again, saying she and Thomas were on a fixed income. The opportunity slipped away. Lauren returned to the shelter that night feeling the weight of choices she had never truly been allowed to make. She believed this might be her life for the foreseeable future. What she didn't know was that 2 years earlier, her grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, had purchased a 3-bedroom home on Birchwood Lane and placed it in an irrevocable trust naming Lauren as the sole beneficiary. Margaret had entrusted the paperwork to Carolyn, believing she would transfer the home when the time was right. Margaret had respected what she thought were Lauren's wishes. Carolyn had told her that Lauren was overwhelmed after the divorce and needed privacy while she adjusted to living in the house. She warned that surprise visits would upset her. Margaret honored that request and limited communication, sending cards to the address she was told Lauren occupied. Meanwhile, Carolyn forged documents allowing her to lease the property to tenants and later secured a home equity line of credit using Lauren's identity. The rent payments and loan proceeds were deposited into accounts shared by Carolyn and Thomas. Lauren knew none of this as she lay awake each night in the shelter listening to Ellie breathe above her. 3 days after giving up hope of finding housing on her own, a black sedan pulled into the shelter parking lot. An elderly woman stepped out, looked through the window, and froze when she saw Lauren inside. Margaret Whitmore entered the shelter slowly, her posture upright but her expression shaken. She had not seen Lauren in nearly 2 years and had believed, based on Carolyn's updates, that Lauren and Ellie were comfortably settled into the Birchwood Lane home. When she reached Lauren's table in the common room, her voice trembled.
"Why aren't you living in your house?" she asked.
Lauren blinked, confused. What house? Margaret pulled out her phone and showed her a copy of the trust deed bearing Lauren's name and the Birchwood Lane address. The document clearly identified Lauren as the beneficiary.
The room seemed to tilt as Lauren read the words.
She had never heard of the property.
She had never received keys.
Margaret stared at her, realization dawning in quiet horror. For the first time, both women understood that something was deeply wrong. In a private meeting room, Margaret explained what she had done. After her husband's death 2 years earlier, she had purchased the house to ensure Lauren and Ellie would always have stability. She placed it into an irrevocable trust and gave the documents to Carolyn, trusting her to deliver them. Carolyn later told her Lauren had moved in but requested privacy while adjusting after the divorce. She discouraged visits, saying Lauren was overwhelmed and needed space. Margaret respected that boundary, believing she was honoring her granddaughter's wishes. Lauren, meanwhile, revealed that she had been living in the shelter for 2 months and had never seen the house. The realization struck Margaret with businesslike clarity. She called her longtime attorney, Michael Reynolds, that same afternoon. Michael's initial search of county property records revealed that the Birchwood Lane home had been leased to tenants for nearly 2 years. The lease bore Lauren's name as the authorized owner, but the signature was not hers. Rental payments totaling over $50,000 had been deposited into an account jointly held by Carolyn and Thomas Hayes. Further investigation showed a home equity line of credit had also been opened using Lauren's identity, with a mobile notary listed as verification, someone later connected to Carolyn's church network. The loan proceeds had funded renovations on Carolyn's home, paid off personal debts, and provided a transfer to Jason's account. The pattern was unmistakable. Michael explained the situation plainly. This was fraud. Lauren reacted the way many people do when betrayal arrives, wearing a familiar face. She sat silently, absorbing the information until the weight became physical. She excused herself to the restroom and became sick before returning to the table.
Margaret waited without pressing.
When Lauren came back, she asked only one question: "Can I still live there?" Michael assured her the trust remained valid and the tenants could be given proper legal notice.
Margaret placed her hand over Lauren's.
"You were meant to have that house," she said quietly. "We'll make this right." For the first time since January, Lauren felt something shift, not relief, but direction. Over the next few days, Michael outlined a realistic plan. First, the current tenants would receive formal notice in accordance with state law. Second, Margaret would amend the trust to remove Carolyn's informal access and appoint Michael as interim trustee. Third, a civil claim for restitution would be filed alongside a criminal complaint for identity fraud and forgery. Finally, Lauren would petition the court to terminate the lingering guardianship, citing the conflict of interest created by Carolyn's actions. Angela provided an affidavit confirming Lauren's responsible care of Ellie during their time at the shelter. Each step followed a lawful timeline, measured and precise. By the end of the week, Lauren was no longer documenting out of instinct, she was preparing evidence. Michael advised Lauren that confronting Carolyn privately would likely result in denial without accountability. Instead, he suggested a formal approach supported by documentation. Lauren agreed but asked for one additional step. Carolyn and Thomas were hosting their 35th wedding anniversary the following week, an event expected to gather close family and longtime friends. Lauren did not want spectacle, but she wanted the truth acknowledged in the same spaces where false narratives had quietly spread. Michael prepared a certified demand letter outlining the trust ownership, the unauthorized lease, the fraudulent credit line, and the financial recovery required. Margaret approved the contents without revision. Meanwhile, Lauren filed a petition to terminate the guardianship. Because it had never been formally dissolved after the divorce, it still existed on paper. Angela's affidavit and Lauren's employment records supported the motion. The court reviewed the request under expedited consideration due to the documented conflict of interest. Without opposition from Carolyn, who had not yet been formally notified, the judge issued an order restoring full custody to Lauren. The decision arrived by email while she was on her lunch break at school. She read it twice before placing her head down on the staff room table and allowing herself a quiet moment of release. That evening, she organized her documents into a binder: trust papers, property records, financial summaries, and communication logs. Each tab represented not revenge but clarity. The next step was to ensure that legal notice reached the tenants of Birchwood Lane. Michael met with the tenants respectfully, explaining that Lauren was the legal owner and that prior leasing arrangements had been unauthorized. They cooperated fully, surprised but understanding once shown the documentation. A standard 6-day notice was issued to allow them time to relocate. Margaret reimbursed their deposit to avoid hardship. Lauren remained outside during the meeting, looking at the house from the sidewalk. The property was modest but welcoming, with a small yard and an oak tree that supported a tire swing.
She did not step inside.
For now, it was enough to know the home existed and that the path toward reclaiming it was lawful. The anniversary gathering took place the following Saturday evening. When Lauren arrived, she sensed the room's expectations before anyone spoke. Carolyn greeted her warmly in front of guests, her tone carrying the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to controlling narratives. Moments later, Margaret entered unannounced.
Conversations paused as she joined the gathering.
With calm composure, she asked a simple question about the Birchwood Lane property she had purchased for Lauren.
Confusion spread quickly.
Lauren spoke only after Carolyn attempted to redirect the topic. She explained, in measured terms, that she had never received the home and had been living in a shelter with Ellie.
The silence that followed was complete.
Lauren placed Michael's certified letter on the table and summarized its contents: unauthorized leasing, fraudulent borrowing against the property, and the ongoing legal action required for restitution.
Margaret confirmed the trust details without embellishment.
Carolyn denied wrongdoing initially, but the presence of documentation limited the conversation to facts rather than interpretation. Lauren then presented the court order restoring full custody of Ellie, removing the leverage that had once discouraged her from speaking openly.
No accusations were shouted. No one raised their voice.
The truth, once stated clearly, required no reinforcement. By the time Lauren left that evening, the narrative surrounding her had begun to shift. Within days of the anniversary gathering, Michael filed a civil claim for financial recovery and submitted documentation supporting criminal review of the fraudulent lease and credit line. The bank that issued the loan opened its own investigation and froze further access. Carolyn and Thomas retained legal counsel and entered negotiations once the evidence was reviewed. The tenants on Birchwood Lane confirmed their move-out timeline and remained cooperative throughout the transition. Lauren continued her daily routine, teaching, caring for Ellie, and meeting with Michael as needed, while the legal process moved forward in measured steps. A settlement was reached several weeks later. Carolyn and Thomas agreed to repay the rental income collected from the property over time and to assume responsibility for the outstanding loan balance taken in Lauren's name. Jason returned the funds he had received. As part of the agreement, Carolyn acknowledged that the Birchwood Lane property belonged solely to Lauren and waived any future claim. The criminal complaint was adjusted in light of restitution and compliance requirements. Contact between Lauren and her parents would occur only through attorneys unless mutually agreed otherwise. By early spring, the tenants had relocated and the house stood empty. Michael completed the final trust transfer and provided Lauren with the keys. When she opened the front door for the first time, Ellie stepped inside cautiously before running toward the backyard when she saw the tires swing beneath the oak tree. Angela helped move their few belongings from the shelter, and Margaret arrived later with basic household supplies. The rooms were simple, but they were theirs. Life settled into a quieter rhythm. Ellie began walking to school from Birchwood Lane, and Margaret visited regularly, no longer kept at a distance by second-hand information. Lauren attended counseling to better understand the patterns that had shaped her silence for years. She maintained clear boundaries with her parents while the repayment plan progressed as agreed. The house became a place defined by routines rather than uncertainty, homework at the kitchen table, drawings on the refrigerator, and evenings that ended without worry about where they would sleep. Months later, as autumn light filled the living room, Ellie asked why it had taken so long for them to live in their own house. Lauren answered simply that sometimes finding the truth takes time. What mattered was that they were there now and intended to stay. The journey had not been about conflict but about reclaiming stability through clarity and lawful action. With the past addressed and the future no longer uncertain, Lauren closed the front door each night knowing that the space behind it was secure. Thank you for watching until the end. Lauren's story is a reminder that truth may take time, but it always finds its way to the surface. Choosing clarity over silence changed everything, not just for her, but for Ellie's future too. If this story moved you in any way, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done in Lauren's place? See you in the next story.